all my fellow fractals. I hope you're having a wonderful day as always. And it is still raining because this is now my third broadcast for Sunday, December 7th. And Sunday definitely seems like a fitting day to do this particular broadcast, which I wish to share with you now. And before we get to that, look at these beautiful, beautiful this beautiful plant in front of me. You know, one of the reasons why, before I get into today's talk on false darkness and false light, that, well, before I get into that, anyways, take a little sidestep. When I started creating my, what do you call it? My shorts, essentially. First, it was when I was creating my Aesop Fable shorts, and then it went on to do my do nothing shorts, do no thing shorts. I found that I really enjoyed filming things from different angles because often when we look at things in our world, we get so caught in routine that we don't necessarily always take time to smell the flowers, as the old quote goes. And so one of the reasons why I choose to show you, well, what you're looking at right now, for example, is because it's something different. It's something that breaks us from our routine of just looking at the normal things we have a tendency to always see. Part of what's around in our world is actually all around us, like I have spoken before, and yet we don't see it simply because we're not accustomed to seeing it. And so that's kind of why I like to show these different perspectives instead of just having me standing there talking. I know in the future there will be times where I stand on stage, or I have been on stage actually talking occasionally on different things. And so it's not that I'm shy to be in front of the camera. It's simply that, well, I'd rather give you something different to look at. And whether it's an AI created, co-created image, or if it's just nature like what I'm showing to you now. Anyways, I trust that you're settling in, and today we're going to talk about false light and false darkness. So, before we get into that, once again, I'm just getting into my sleeping bag because I'm back outside with my wonderful rain. So, again, thank you for joining me. I wish to let everyone know that I wish to bless and I am grateful for each and every single person whom I've ever loved. And I feel that everyone that I've ever loved, that I ever will love, is protected by God. I protect these audios that I create now to be protected by God. And I just put that out there as a little bit of a blessing before I start. And, you know, our world is meant to be full of love, and that love is being reconnected by Source as we speak, or perhaps it's already done and we're just waking up to see it. So thank you, and let's go. So now this information came from the different various GIA reports that I witnessed, and as well it came from different other people like Carrie Kay, and I won't go start spitting off a whole bunch of names. I always seem to default to those two, but it also came to from other people. One person named Crystal, then there was Sarah, and lots of other books. There was a lot from Paul Selig has a series of channeled books, so Ram Dass as well. There's a lot of different, you could say, parts to the recipe in which I share this with you. So just to put that out there. Yeah. So false light and false darkness. Now, I don't know. I don't know where to start with this. So I guess in a sense, I'm trying to figure out where to start with this, because this is a huge topic as well. Just as everything in our world that was different or distorted from what the truth of it was. And like I said before, I'm not necessarily saying this is the truth. This is information to get the conversation started, to get town halls and community halls and classrooms and wherever, coffee shops, wherever people talk, so that we can start talking perhaps about something different rather than the political theater which we see on our TVs. And so the idea of false darkness and false light is that our world was created, or controlled more importantly. Create is not the right word, so I'm going to cancel that out right away. Our world was controlled and operated by darkness. But darkness didn't do it necessarily through their own devices. Darkness stayed on the outside, and darkness was able to create a reality or a perception that good and evil did exist. And yet, from this, we'll call it a theory, but a postulate or information put forward, is that an artificial light and an artificial dark were created by darkness, who itself was artificial. Supposedly, when wisdom fell from grace, so became a fallen angel, it no longer had the ability to create on its own. When it was disconnected from source, of course, from source, the source of its creativity, it no longer had the ability. So it, in its desire to continue to create, it started creating artificial life. And this artificial life essentially needed a power source. And that's where the Homo sapiens came in over time. And in order for us to live in a habitat, just like what you see on the movie The Matrix, to have a environment in order to express our creativity and release our energies and all that stuff, they had to create what I'll call a playground. And this playground, well, it had elements of darkness and elements of light within it. And even though darkness was responsible for it, it still created its own false darkness and its, as I said, its own false light, because there had to be, based on a lot of different agreements and laws and rules and all that lovely stuff, but basically, you know, what had to be done is there had to be a balance. And I've mentioned this before, where there was a balance most recently, or sometime recently anyways, that there was a balance of a 21% positive or light and 79% darkness. And this was, or you could say this balance, if you want to call it a balance, but this balance. I'm not meaning balance as in that was favorable or acceptable. I'm just saying balance as, you know, that is what the balance was kept at. Anyways, that it was kept at that because beings within that reality, within that matrix, within that simulation, that they were kept in between the false light and the false darkness. So meaning that, like, I guess the challenge of this is this, like I said, this is such a big topic because this hits right at the heart of modern religions. And I'm not just talking about one or two religions, I'm talking about all of the religions. See, me, myself, and I, when we grew up in with a Christian background. And I went to Sunday school and I learned stuff about the Bible, and it just honestly didn't resonate with me. And I don't know why. I'm not going to go back. I haven't actually went back and reviewed any of that. However, the fact remains is that it didn't resonate with me. Although I've always believed there was a higher power. I've always felt it deep down that there is something beyond me, some unifying something or other. And then I'm speaking from me growing up, that that there is something more than me. I do remember that when my friend died when I was a child, I was 12, I believe, and he was 10, and his whole family perished in an airplane crash. I had talks with God, and I really didn't understand that whole situation. So even at that time, I believed in God. I believed in what we now call a source. I've always believed. That's always been a staple part of me, and yet I've never truly resonated with religion overall. And I went into it, not experimenting, but I researched many of the different religions, and I came to see that they did have similarities, which these similarities have been definitely shown in a series and a multitude of videos that Christianity, Islam, the Jewish religions, other religions, like even the pagan religions and the Viking religions and the Babylonian religions, and you can just keep going back, but they all seem to have a very similar set of situations. Now, of course, there is the difference between monotheistical, so that means people who look at one God, and then, of course, others who have a series of gods. So anyways, keeping more to the focus of what false light was, and I think maybe that's more important to speak about right now, is the false light. And that's why I talk about Sunday. See, in order to keep that balance, darkness constantly had to do good. There had to be a positive part of whatever they did. And that was in order to maintain this balance and this control over our reality. And so when I look at religions, or when we look at religions, I guess, we can see that there are a lot of positive aspects to any of them. And that's one of the things that I came across when I was, through my healing period over the last few years, is that people find God the way they find God. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong, and there isn't, you guys over there are wrong and us over here are right, or any of that stuff. People find their own path. When I was reading the Paul Selig books, he often would talk about moving boulders up mountains. And the idea is that we're essentially all on a path up to the same mountain. We're all going to see the same view when we get to the peak of the mountain. Yet the path that we took to get up that mountain, it's different for everyone. So even though perhaps many were blinded by, or confused by, or basically deceived by false light, and I'm not going to start inserting different religions into that. You can look at that yourself. We're all going towards the same thing. And now when I say we all are going, and I'm using we all, I'm truly meaning the people who are going to listen to this and possibly share it, or it's going to somehow affect them, or, that's the we that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about we as in everyone on the planet, because first of all, not everyone on the planet is going to be able to listen to this. More importantly, there's a lot of beings on the planet that worship other things. So whether they come with us or not, it's partly to do with their choice, but mostly to do with God's choice. Anyways, back to false light. So we have been affected by what we thought was light. So, for instance, back in when you watch movies like, one of my favorite used to be Braveheart. And so you had the crown who say they believed in God, and the king said that they spoke on behalf of God, but yet they're running around murdering people. And then you see these crusades where this religion went over and they attacked that religion, the Christian crusades, and you see the Inquisitions, and you see a lot of like inhumane things that truly were there in order to maintain that balance of false light and false darkness being in the 2179. When you unite a empire under war, in my opinion, there's no justification for the positive portions of that situation. So I just finished watching, for example, season 2 of the House of Dragon, and I'm going to do actually I have talked a little bit about that in the past, but I'm going to do more of that because I feel that there's a little bit of history there. Anyways, the main characters were basically believing themselves to be righteous because they were uniting their lands or the kingdom under the banner of war. And it almost appeared as if both sides believed the same thing. So in a sense, that's a great example for believing in false light, believing that you are doing the right thing by harming others. And other things of false light are people getting you to move into organizations, and then as you move up into the organization, admitting the bad things, that they're not the bad things, but the harmful things to others, and then justifying it, why it's okay. And so those are great examples. And I've heard people talk about that stuff, talk about joining secret societies and then realizing, oh no, the secret society is not doing what they said as they got higher up, and then even leaving those secret societies. And so that's an example, in my opinion, that of false light. But false light wasn't just that. False light was bringing people together in a church and then talking about love and talking about Jesus and talking about all of these principles that resonated with people, and then yet hating on certain groups of people because of their sexual choices or their preferences or whatever it is. Like, I've always believed the one who will judge is God. And that really is all there is for judgment. And that humans judging people on their behaviors and attitudes, and once again, giving us the illusion that we're being good, and then yet joining up with those who would spread hate. And I'm not saying all of that is, but you know, the issue with sexual preference is a big one when it comes to our society. And I honestly believe that love is love wherever you find love, as long as it's love and not lust. And when I mean lust, I mean that the actual thing where you go after and you're not really caring about anything. Having animal instinct to that, I don't call lust. But anyways, so with false light, they kept us an illusion that we were doing good, that we were doing stuff. And here's another example of false light. During the war of whenever it was, and I don't want to start using words, I saw videos of Red Cross packages full of money. And even when I was younger, I was convinced to donate to a little girl in Africa. And after a while, even at a young age of 16 or 17 or whenever I was, I started to realize that, you know, what I was receiving back, and it was supposed to be a letter and like a picture or whatever of how the girl and her family was doing, I started to realize that it wasn't her, that I wasn't even communicating with the actual person that I was supposed to be supporting. And when I brought this up, I was explained that, oh, well, you know, she can't do it. Like, she doesn't have the ability, so we help her. And yet they send me a report card, and in the report card, it tells me that her English level's low, but then the writing is pretty good. And I started to see that there's a lot of deception when it comes to even charities. And there's a lot of deception when it comes to NGOs and nonprofit organizations. And to me, that's all part of false light as well, in the sense that we believe that we're doing something different than we're actually doing. So many people believed they donated money to charities. So many different charities. I'm not going to start naming names, but so many different charities had money donated to them. And they had this month and this awareness and that awareness. Little do we know, though, that a lot of that money went to someone's pocket. And once again, false light. Once again, I'm not saying it's any specific one, because I don't necessarily need to. I think that as time goes on, God will reveal all of this. However, it's important to know that when we donate something, that it's actually going to where we put it, because that's another example of us having the energy, which is money or currency, and then redirecting it towards something that we hope is going to be beneficial. And yet often a lot of these, we'll just call them taxes, because that's what a lot of these charities are, they end up getting redirected to someone else. And so therefore another example, once again, in my opinion, of false light. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean or align 100% with other people when they talked about false light. This is more of how I see it. It's the idea that we believe we're doing good, that we're looking to do good, and yet there's corruption in behind it. During the events of 2020, there were a lot of churches who essentially moved more towards a one world religion church system. Even in the churches near me, they took the word baptism off the building of the church. And they used a lot of words to kind of like normalize, that church was church, as opposed to there used to be more, from what I observed, more denominations of church. And there probably is, maybe in other people's neighborhoods or other people's cities or whatever. But that was my experience, as I started seeing these churches go more towards a one world situation. And even in news reports, the heads of all the major religions from all over the world were said to have gotten together and had some meetings. And many of those religions are using variations of the Bible written how they would prefer it, or the ones that they would choose to use. And there's a lot of different stuff within those books that lead me to question. One of them, for example, was, I believe it was in the King James Version, that there were portions in there talking about how it was important that people pay their taxes, and that to pay your taxes, you're being good to God or you're loving God. Well, to be honest, I can't imagine how paying your taxes and God relates in any form or fashion at all. And then there was another one talking about how that if you loved God, I'll put it this way, that you had short hair, that having long hair was some sort of an offense against God. When I've come to understand that the people with longer hair, or having longer hair, you were more connected to God because of whatever reason. But nonetheless, lots of women had really long hair. And yet we look back for the last 2,000 years at least, or at least of my perspective of it, and there was a lot of keeping women down. There was a lot of hostility towards feminine divinity and feminines overall. And this last few number of years, there has been a lot of short-haired people, and not even just short-haired, because some of them, their hair was somewhat longer, but there was a lot of males who were running this planet into the ground. And, the people that were in charge of the churches were, for the majority, male. And they were leading us towards something that, a lot of people have opened their eyes to see and start to question what the church has been saying. See, my knowledge or understanding, and I don't have firsthand, or I have yet to experience being in the Vatican. However, my understanding of it is there's demonic gargoyles, and they name their things with, things that we would, symbols that we would see as evil. And they have a lot of different rituals that, the average Catholic may not agree with, but yet are unknown. They have, and I guess until recently maybe, scoured the world and hid all of the artifacts that could conceal our true history. And see, all there, right there, again says to me that if they are willing to hide and conceal our true history, then there's definitely something false there. There's something there that is definitely worth investigation. And we've seen it. We've seen the videos, we've seen the movies, like Da Vinci's Code, for example. That kind of really well showed that there was some sort of hidden agenda behind the church, and there were secrets. And they talk about Mary Magdalene, and they talk about other things that, I've often spoke about how they use movies in order to perhaps distort our personal own thoughts. We see something maybe as a documentary, and then the next we'll go over to a movie. The movie will be an authorized narrative that has been CIA approved in its script, and therefore they'll associate the documentary, which are a lot of times thoughts and ideas and perhaps intuition coming through, and then they'll get distorted over, or they'll just create their own documentary and call it like whatever they want to call it, put it out on one of their documentary channels, History Alive, when it's very well scripted. Anyway, so back onto the false light. The idea is that whether we were dark or we were light, meaning that whether we subscribe to the ideals of darkness, and believe me, there are a lot of people who are openly dark, meaning that they believe in witchcraft. And whether or not they see that as dark, it's still dark if you're using it for dark reasons and whatever. But there are people on the planet who do see themselves as part of the occult, part of the darkness, and they have different reasons, and they've been brought up and led to believe different things. And so, while I'm not essentially going to say anyone's wrong, I'm saying that those people have believed other beings to be gods. We'll leave that edited to be right there. And so whether we were on the side of light or we were on the side of dark, in a sense, those were both false, and we were being led by darkness. And see, I think that this is a real big important point to put out, because unknowingly being led allows us to say, okay, well, perhaps we weren't fully in control of what we did. And that allows for self-forgiveness, realizing. But in order to self-forgive, first we have to become aware. We have to admit that we were part of that, as I was once part of darkness. I've talked about it before. I played video games. I swore at little kids. I feel really bad. I apologize to every child or adult or girl or boy that I've ever sworn at while I was playing video games, because I was led to believe I was relaxing. I was led to believe that this was my downtime, and, playing war games was a pastime activity, when in all actuality, it was a program meant to distort and contort my love, which is within the core of me. And so we've all had those times where we fell and succumb, whatever. We we essentially allow darkness to control us. So even if we were under the illusion of light, that there were darkness working through us. See, one of the case in points of this is, growing up, I heard about this being called Archangel Michael, and Archangel Gabriel, and Archangel Raphael. I heard other beings called Sophia, and I heard a lot about, I read a book called The Sophia Code that talked about Sophia and Isis and other beings. And anyways, there was also another being called Uriel, which I had an understanding that this being was a positive being, but yet it seems Uriel was one of the players of this game called Earth, and this person was definitely not of the light, not of God's light. And even there was a being called Lucerne, who was somehow similar to Lucifer, and Lucerne was supposedly at one time God's player in this game. Now, back to what I was, and I don't know what happened after. If I ever do find that out, I'll let you know. Or if you have any ideas, you can write it in the comments. And so back to Archangel Michael, is I always believed that Archangel Michael was some divine being that was helping people out. A little while later, I find out that Archangel Michael was we'll call it the low vibrational side, and Angel Michael was the higher vibrational side. And that this particular being was a neutral being. And yet, it's most well known for Archangel Michael. And it's a great example of how false light was guiding us, and we were believing it to be benevolent when it had other agendas to look at. Now, as per the GIA report, Archangel Michael, Archangel Gabriel, and Archangel Raphael were returned to source, I believe, last September. And as part of, our transition into a higher New Earth, New Eden, 5D or above reality, and that this particular part of false light was released from our planet. Yet there remains a considerable amount of false light that still exists on our planet today. See, my feeling or understanding of religion overall is that religion, like everything else, was used as a tool to divide us. So while I've talked about the falling of the Tower of, I think Babel, I think it was, it's the idea that if you want to control a population, the way that you control the population is you separate them. You separate them by so many different things, from class to, from class, from gender. Like, you just think of all the ways you can separate people. But one of the ways that they separated people was through religion itself. They gave one group of people one religion, another group of people another religion, and then so on and so on. And then those religions themselves would splinter, and that they would actually, when I say they, I mean the people who actually controlled our planet, when they would find an opportunity, they would throw division. When they needed some sort of distraction, or they needed a war because it was time for depopulation, or they needed whatever it is they needed. They would need a certain battlefield lit up with loosh and such. They would need to bring down something else. But my point is that religion was one of their tools to set one group of people against another group of people who might not even speak the same language. Therefore, you can't really get on the battlefield and talk about your experiences, but they would fabricate stories, religious stories, and because people were so convinced that their God was the only God, that they would easily clash against each other. And this misery and struggle has led to so many deaths on our planet. See, right there, in my opinion, is the glowing example of how false light, any religion who's ever asked people to enter a war and harm other people, whether it was a battlefield or a village or wherever it was, any religion who's ever asked people to do that, in my opinion, unless it was for the defense, and defense means you stay in your village, and if they come to you, you defend. It doesn't mean you defend by going halfway around the world and pretending to drop anything on their town while they sleep. Any religion who's ever participated, whatever it is, in my opinion, becomes that false light, because God did not permit us to harm one another. God permits us to protect one another. God protects us, of course, and we are therefore given the ability to protect innocence. Yet there is so many atrocities committed in the act of, whether it was the Catholic Church, whether the Christians, there were the different sects of Christianity, the Muslims, like, yeah, I don't want to go. We've seen the movies. We are aware of all of the different things that happened. And for me, that's the glowing thing of false light showing its head, convincing us that it's okay to harm another or to do worse. And so, with that being said, as I've mentioned before, this is just a conversation. This is just me thinking and thoughts and sharing with you, thoughts and things that I think or that I've come across. It's not the know-all, because of course I don't know all. The only one who knows all is God, and perhaps the planet itself. They say that there is a device somewhere underneath the Egyptian area that has recorded everything that's happened on Earth since the beginning of time, or since at least the beginning of when it was put there some hundreds of thousands of years ago. Because this is how long, in my understanding, it has been going on. Life on this planet has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. And I don't mean life as in protoplasmas and little one celled this or that. I mean actual intelligent bipedal walking around, whether or not they had a head that looks like ours or head of another being. You insert what you'd like. The point being is that we've had beings on our planet for a very long time, sharing it, and perhaps even all around us the whole entire time, or a large portion of it. And yet, these most recent religions are quite new. They're very new. They're fabricatedly new. And yeah, so if we look back, what's to say that, well, I know there was a time, although I've yet to remember it, when we did know what we were. And that's essentially what I understand us to be going through right now. This is the great remembering. We are reconnecting with our members. We are, and when I say members, I mean those parts of us that we've lost. And we are restoring our, I guess, our history. I'm so excited recently, and that I'm seeing a lot of restoration of our information to do with Tartaria, because I think Tartaria represents a most recent reset. And yeah, we'll leave that story for another day. So I trust that you have gained something from this, and I understand not everyone's going to receive this. And partially to do with the amount of shadow banning and blocking that my channel has. But more importantly, a lot of people aren't necessarily ready to hear that their religion maybe wasn't telling the truth the whole time. Yet keep in mind, the positive benefits of all religions, in my opinion, do hold part of our path. So it's not that anything should just be completely thrown out and move a different direction. There's no, by no means am I meaning that. Yet perhaps we become more aware of the distortions within those religions and then move on. I definitely foresee a world that is more governed by one's intuition and directly by Source, the God of all. So thank you so much for sharing your intention and time with me. Thank you for exploring possibilities. Because as I said, this is not necessarily about what's true or what's not true. You could say it's my truth if you wanted to kind of work towards something. Often I find myself, really examining the world and seeing what's there, and just checking in with myself of how this resonates with me, strengthening my discernment. So rather than being a person who's listening to the programming that I've received all my life, I'm starting to see, okay, maybe things were a lot different than we thought. And well, false light is a great example of it, because it hits home and it hits hard at the way that our society was essentially structured. This false light that we lived with, it governed our world. And it was strong enough to keep it in a perpetual state of fear, which included even some of the Bibles showing God as a vengeful, angry God who was going to bring harm upon those who went against him. When, to me, that was just propaganda to get one side to fight the other side, and then to condemn their souls, because it seems that a lot of this game that we lived within, it was all about how many souls they could get. And so, with that being said, I love you. I trust that you are doing amazing. I trust that so many amazing things are in the pipeline for the Homo sapiens of Earth right now. And maybe the Homo sapiens of Gaia. There's a little bit of history about which planet we're on that's kind of interesting that I'll share. Maybe next. Who knows? Thank you very much for sharing your time with me, and I bid you adieu.